Okay. All right. So this will help clarify that, hopefully. So I want to go over what the output of this will look like. Okay. So what is our end goal? So this is just a little animation I did. It's very, 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 very super duper similar to what we've already done with the name, with the text. Okay. So if you look, it comes together, but then it also goes apart. Okay. So it's like a looping kind of animation. You don't have to do a looping kind of animation. You can just do like the first part of this where it just comes in and stops there. Okay. You want this to not take a whole lot of time. So whatever you've animated to bring this stuff from a black screen to a white screen should probably be within those 90 frames, unless like Austin, you've gone bananas and is doing something much more intricate. Okay. Cool. So the way that I did that is the same thing. I created a plane, and then I just used the, if you can look at it, the poly effects, which is what we used in the last one, right, to break it apart. And then here's my random, and here's my plane. That's all I did, right? The same exact thing. The only thing I added to this one to bring it back together is I added another random and plane, and I basically just have it going the other way. So one goes this way to break it apart, one goes this way to take it away, to put it together, one goes this way to take it apart, okay?
Copy the same one.
Exactly. Copy the same one, and then the only thing I had to do was go to that poly effects, the original one, go to the effectors, and just add those other ones in here. So you see how in that effector I have all 4 listed. Okay, you click the arrow, and then you can click all the ones you want to add to it. That's all that is. Okay. So if there was a specific picture, so last class I brought up the screen, and I showed how we can project stuff onto that screen, right? All right, so if I know ahead of time I want my gorilla friend to be on that screen, I created a texture and I dropped it on that plane. Let me just turn this off real quick, turn this back on, turn this on, turn that on, and then that. Okay, because those are the default settings. Okay, so if I put it back to the default and I render this out, that's what he's going to look like. So you see how he's kind of like washed out? Okay, we don't want it washed out. So I want this to be as clean as possible. So I take any reflections off of it, I go to my color, and I turn that off, and I go to my luminance, and I just put the file texture there. Okay? So whatever colors you're going to assign to something, put it under, bless you, the luminance. That way it's going to be as bright as we want it to be. Okay? So it's like full brightness. So now when I render this out, he looks exactly the same. He looks just like an image. That's what we want. Okay? So when you assign materials in this case, you're going to assign them just to the luminance, not to the other one. Okay? If you're going to put an actual image. So I'm going to show 2 different ways. If I'm just doing a solid color, like just white, again, when I render this out, it may be hard to see on the projector, but there are different shades that are inside here. Like it's a bit more gray up here than it is down there. That's a little bit whiter. So I would still do the same thing. I would still go to my luminance and turn color and reflectance off so that when I render it, I get a solid white color. Okay? Now watch when I rewind this to where my image is not on the screen and I render it. So we have black here, right? Yes? Yes. Okay. Then we have white. And in the middle, we have some sort of transition coming with the stuff moving back onto the screen. That's all that you need to have. It goes from black to white in some more fun manner than just popping on the screen or just being there. Okay? And what I mean by that is I don't want one frame to be this and then the next frame to be that. Okay? Because that's boring. The idea with the ones that come loaded with the software is that it's some kind of cool pattern that builds that creates it. Okay? You don't have to go into anything crazy. Something as simple as just doing that is all you need to do. So you can make a plane, break it apart, put the randoms on here just to build it back up again. Okay? So now my animation will look like this. It'll go from black to white. Okay? That's my animation. Now when I set this up to actually render out, I need to make sure that it fills that proportion perfectly. Okay? So I can't have this be in the center of my screen is my animation, then I have all this black stuff around it because it wouldn't fit where I want this to eventually go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to my cameras, no, not cameras, panels, arrangement, 2 views side by side. There we go. Okay. So I'm making 2 views side by side, and I'm going to make a new camera. Okay, and then so one of my views, I'll look through the camera. There we go. Okay, so this view here, I'm looking through this camera. And I can test that by going to the coordinates and resetting it. And you'll see how this moved back to that spot. Okay, because I was in this view and then click that, it jumps that view to that camera. So what I need to do is I need to line up that camera so it's looking straight at that image. Okay, and that image will then fill my background. So I'm resetting all my rotates and translates. Let me hide my other camera just so you don't see that right now. Okay. So this is what the camera is going to look like in perspective. Okay. So what I want to do is rotate it so it's facing straight down, so it's going to be 90 degrees. And then I want to move it up until it fills that spot that it's going to render. Now in previous assignments, you remember our resolution that we're using is 960 by 540, right? The default is 800 by 600, which is again different. This one, because of where it's going to be ending up, has to match the proportions of our end product. Does anyone remember what those were? 40 by 44 or 44 by 40, right? So if I'm going landscape, it's going to be 44 by 40. If I'm going portrait, it's going to be 44 by 40, okay? So I'm going to go to my render settings, and I'm going to type in, come on, 44, in my case, I know it's going to be taller, so it'll be 40 by 44, okay? There we go, 40 by 44. Like we also talked about, if I were to have rendered this out at 40 by 44, it would probably look like junk. Just to prove it, here is this image. There we go. I'm going to hit Control R. Oops. Shift R, sorry. That's what it looks like at 40 by 44. Okay, so that looks pretty junky. So what I do is once I punch in that 40 by 44, I can lock this ratio, and then I can start to play with this number to get the detail that I want. Now if I type in 40,000 by 44,000, it's going to be super detailed, sure, but it's like way overkill, okay? I would say even 4,000 is overkill, okay? So if I went to 400 by 440, same proportions. Again, I can hit Shift R and see where I'm at. That looks pretty good. Maybe I'll go a little bit further. I'm just going to double this and go to 800. So that's a little bit clearer. If I go to 1200, that's about the same. Okay, so I'm actually going to render mine out at 1200 by whatever that other number was, 1320. Okay, so there's no specific number you have to render yours by. Just make sure that you have enough resolution that if you did put an image on it, that it's going to look good. Okay, and you can test that out by putting an image on it. I haven't done anything fancy there. I literally just made a material, just like we've done before, put a picture on it, and dropped it on the item. That's all that's been done there. All right, so once I have that, I can take this monkey off there for now. I have my settings. So once I've done that, now I have this box right here that's going to show me what that's going to look like. If I don't see it, I can click on the camera and go to Object. Where did they hide it? Nope. I have to go somewhere else, sorry. Every software likes to move their stuff around. Configure, there it is. So I went to Options here and Configure, and then I will turn on Render Safe, and that will show me exactly what is renderable. So you see the difference in the two spots there, okay? So what should happen is my image should fit perfectly in that box, okay? If not 100% perfect, I can nudge it in a little bit. All right. So now I'm going to go back to this view. I'm going to go back to where my plane is on. And I'm just going to move my camera up and down until it fits that. Okay, so right there, you see that it fits. My edges fit perfectly inside that box. Now, if my plane was not in those same proportions of 40 by 44 or 44 by 40, it wouldn't work, right? That's the whole deal with proportions versus an actual size, is if I have something that's this big and I scale it up, as long as it's the same proportions, they're going to be able to line up. If one is really wide and really short, it's not going to line up with something like that, okay? Now, if I, just to show you, if I go to this plane and I set it to, just for fun, 20, there's no way I'm ever going to be able to move my camera to get this thing to line up perfectly, okay? So, purposefully, I moved my divisions here to get it to line up with that. I could have used the exact same thing I did before. I could have typed in 440 by 400. Oops, the other way around. There we go. And then taken my camera and moved it in, and you'll see that it still fits perfectly within there, okay? It doesn't matter as far as that goes. That's just going to control some other stuff that I play with, afterwards. Okay. So what I would do at this point is I would render it out, just like we've done before. I have a white image. My camera is set up. I'll rename this so I don't get confused. Render cam. I go to my render settings. This is already set. I don't need to change that. I'm rendering all my frames. I'm going to save and put this into my folder. This will go into renders, which I will rename to spell correctly. Sarcona AnimatedPlane. Name.number.extension. We will include an alpha channel. That will give us the transparency that we'll need to put images on this. So make sure we click that. We don't need a multipass. Anti-aliasing, we'll take this to best. We'll take this to Mitchell. And that's it. A tip for all of you when you're doing this, if it's hard to remember any of these settings, I take pictures with my phone. So I will go through and I will say, what does this window look like? Click. And then what does this window look like? And what does this window look like? Because it is easier for me to pull out my phone, go to my gallery, and say, oh, there it is. And those three are right next to each other. Versus trying to hunt through my notes, which are pretty much, they look very similar. Okay? You could also make yourself a little cheat sheet that says, here's all the stuff that we're changing on our render settings for all of our projects. Okay? These three, output, save, and anti-aliasing, every project, we will be touching those. Okay? We will be adding other ones to it, but that's going to be the basic ones. So then I will go through and I will say render. I will say add to render queue. Yes. It's going to go into my animated plane folder, and then I will hit render. Okay? So now this process should not take very long. We don't have any lights in the scene, purposefully, because there's nothing else in it. I just want that black to white image. That's all I want. There's no depth of field. There's no motion blur. You could add motion blur to your stuff if you wanted to, but I wouldn't add depth of field. And it's literally just a plane. Okay? We can get more complex with this, and I'll show that in a second after we get through this part. All right? So look at what it's doing. So it rendered out that black going to white, and now it's rendering out the white going to black again because I have it kind of fade off or transition off. And this rendering is taking what? Not even a minute? 45 seconds so far? And it's pretty much done. Okay. All right. So once it's done, I go into After Effects, just like we did on the mini room, just like we did on the animated title. I double click. I go and find my footage. Animated plane, renders, there he is. I make sure that I click on one piece, right, not all of them. I click on TIFF sequence or whatever it is if it's not selected, and then I hit import. When this box comes up, in our render settings, we click alpha channel. This is saying what do you want to do with that alpha channel. I want to pre-multiply it, and basically what that means is eliminate that background so that we do have a see-through item, okay? And then I'll hit OK. Then I can drag this onto the new composition. I can hit play just to verify that everything worked correctly. There it is. And there it goes away. Okay? Like I said, yours doesn't have to go away. It just has to come on at least. All right? Sweet. Now let's pretend that I didn't size mine up correctly. Let's pretend, I'm just going to hit scale and just scoot it down a little bit. Let's pretend that when we render this out, we were a little bit short, right? So it did that. No big deal. Just click on your footage, hit S, and then just click and drag on these letters, or numbers, whatever they're called, and then scale it up, okay? And that will just stretch it out. Even if you go a little bit past it, nobody will notice, okay? So then once I'm done with that, I know that it fills it. I know I go from a completely black screen to a completely white screen. I'm pretty much done. I just have to make a movie. So I add this to the render queue. I click on lossless. I go to QuickTime. I make sure it's H.264, yes and yes. And I make sure it goes into the right folder. 2510, Animated Plane, Final, Sarcona Animated Plane. And then I hit render. Okay? So again, that's all it's doing. Black to white to black. You can do other stuff besides wiping it and getting it like this one. You can do other stuff. Austin is doing a, I'm going to tell everyone, you guys can't steal his because he already called it, a Tetris board. Okay, so he modeled the 4 pieces, 5 pieces? How many different? No. How many actual different shapes?
Yeah, I know. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 shapes.
7?
7. But like some of them are like you have the L shape and you have the L shape that's like reversed.
Okay, yeah. All right, I wasn't counting that.
Yeah.
All right, so he modeled 7 different shapes, okay, and then he's moving those and animating those to fill up the screen. Again, he's starting off with black, and then he's going to white to get that area to fill in, okay? So that's it. That's the assignment, okay? You can literally make a plane, break it apart, put it back together, and just make sure you rendered it out correctly, and it's good, sir.
Can I have my Tetris pieces be colored instead of white?
You can, okay? Now, that's the next part of this. So, in this one, that's the basic thing. That's bare minimum, that's what I want. Now, if you want to start to get fancy, then you can start adding stuff to it. So here's what's cool about doing just the white plane. I may not know what kind of image I want to put on there, okay? Right now, I realize, hey, I want to put that monkey picture on there. So I'm going to go and grab that picture of the monkey. Under title sequence, nope, under mini room, under textures, under monkey picture. Okay, and I'm going to drag him down into this area. Okay, so now here's the monkey picture. I'm going to scale him up so he's nice and big. So I click on scale for him and make him bigger. And you'll see he goes past it. Again, I don't care. Now I want to get the monkey to do the animation. I want to build the picture of the monkey up so that he actually like is created, not just like there. This is not part of the base assignment, just so you're aware. This is just extra stuff, extra information, okay? This is free. This is no complimentary or no additional cost. I'm going to go to the monkey picture and drag him below the sequence. I'm going to click on these toggle switches until I get to where it says track matte, and I'm going to make sure that this says alpha matte plane. Now, it looks like nothing happened, okay? But what actually happened is that animation that we just had is now influencing what the monkey picture is, where the monkey picture is visible, okay? So watch when I rewind this, the monkey goes away. Okay, I just hit the home key, that's the rewind button. Hotkey list over there if you never need hotkey list. Now when I hit play, watch. The monkey picture gets built, and then he goes away. It's awesome. Okay? Now the reason for that is that if we have our board and we have it on a showcase and we want to change the picture that's in it, that's where we can use that. Okay? So I can put any picture I want in there and it'll build it up or it'll tear it down. Okay? Whatever I want to do. And the little, I guess, a little extra tip on this, let me drag this down here to this. Okay? See how this builds upwards like that? And then from here, it goes that way and goes away. Okay? When I did that, I could have actually gotten away with just doing this one time. And this is where, who has not had After Effects before? Quite a few. Okay. If you haven't had After Effects, this is where After Effects is fantastic because it allows us to shorten our work inside of 3D. So if you think about it, my animation is basically, it goes from black to white, and these little tiles pop up to make it, right? All right. So I'm going to cut my animation in half. So I just have this. What happened to you? Oh, there it is. Okay. So that's what it does, right? It just goes like that. And then after this, it cuts off, because I literally cut that animation, like I just rendered half of it. So I can take this and I can actually duplicate it, scoot it down to the end of this. I'm going to have to scoot it again in a second. That's fine. I'm going to negative scale it. Okay, so what it's going to do is it's going to like play it backwards.
What did you type there?
Negative 100
Okay.
in the stretch. Okay, so now what should happen is it does this. That's the first part. That's fine. And then when it gets to there, now it's going to go backwards that way. Okay, now if I wanted to go the other way, no big deal either. I can hit rotate and type in 180. So now it's going this way to get built up, and then that way to break up again. Okay, so After Effects is a great tool because we can take a piece of animation and apply it and use it over and over in all these different instances. Okay, again, not part of the assignment, just extra information. Now, like I said, that's the basic stuff. Here's extra stuff that you could do to this to, again, make it fancier, to make it better. Let me save this one. Let me make a new one real quick. Instead of just using a plane, you can use a cube. Okay? Without breaking up the cube. Okay? Think of this like the plane was a flat plane with a bunch of divisions, a bunch of faces on it, and then we told Cinema to break up each one of those faces, just like we did in our text. The more faces we had, the more pieces we had that would break up, right? Okay, so what I want to do with this cube is I don't want to break up the cube. I want to just create a bunch of cubes that I could then animate, right? So I'm going to go under MoGraph, and I'm going to go to this cloner, okay? Now, just like the other effector, it matters the order that these things are in. This one, however, the cloner wants to be on top, and the cube wants to be underneath it, okay? That fracture effects, it was the plane, and then the poly effects, the poly effects was underneath it. So I'm going to hold down Alt, I'm going to click on cloner, and you'll see the cloner gets on top, the cube gets underneath. From here, and again, there's a bunch of stuff right there. Don't look at the entire thing and get overwhelmed. Look at the sections of it and just try to figure out what each area is trying to tell you, okay? Notice how they have these little lines right there and there and here. That's helping you kind of disseminate which information goes where, okay? So in this area, this controls where the items are listed or where the items are laid out. So right now, the position of Y is 50 centimeters. So every new clone moves up 50 centimeters. Then the next one, 50 centimeters. And the next one, 50 centimeters. We don't see that right now because each cube is, I think, 200 centimeters, okay? So if I have a 200 centimeter block and I move it up 50, it's going to be intersecting the other one, right? It's not going to be like on top of it. It's going to be in the middle of it. If I turn on my lines, you'll be able to see it, okay? See how it looks like disgusting. If I change this to 200, now they're going to be on top of each other. So now they literally are like stacked right on top of each other. If I go above 200, now there's actually a space, okay? So with this kind of grid, I don't want to go up. I want to do basically what I did before, is create a grid structure that goes out and widthwise, okay? So I'm going to focus on the X direction and the Z direction to get that. So I'm going to put my Y to 0, so it goes back to there. And this is where, if you're really good at math, that may come in handy. So if you ever, thought math never helped you, then this would be a spot where it would. Okay. So I'm going to go to 44 here and 40 there. Okay. Now what this is doing is it's basically just taking a step, right? So as I click on this count and I make this more, do you see how it's just like offsetting it there? I don't want just to offset it. I actually want to create like a grid of all of these, okay? Now, before you knew about the next step I'm going to show you, you could actually take a cloner and put it inside of a cloner so that I could clone one this way and then clone another one going the other way. That is a possible thing to do. All right. But up here where it says mode, I can just choose grid and then control what each grid is going to do. Okay, so once I choose that, again, the options that are not relevant go away, and then we just have this. So now that we have a 3 count going X, Y, and Z, and each one is 200 centimeters. Okay,
So
if
that's
I
a bunch of cubes, or?
that's a bunch of cubes. Yep.
Okay.
So just like I said, I don't want any extras in the Y, so I'm just going to put that to 0. Well, 1, whatever. And then the X direction and the Z direction, that's where I'm going to start typing in the 400 by 440. Okay? So now that's just 400 by 440. Each cube, remember, is 200. So obviously it's not very many. So I'm going to just stretch this out to an enormous amount. Like this will be like 4,000 by 4,400. There we go. Okay. So that's what it's going to look like right now. Now we only have 3 of them going across, 3 of them going up and down. That's where I would then start filling this in. And you don't have to be good at math to figure this out. You just keep clicking until you get it about there. Okay? I have to hit O to zoom in on that so I can see it. There we go. Okay. So I'm almost there. I actually think I am there. I just think my lines are in the way. Yep, perfect. Okay. So that worked out perfectly. Now let me go the other direction. Okay, and that's 23. Perfect. Now the advantage of doing something with a cube versus doing just the plane is now I have depth, so that when I do project this, it's going to give it the appearance that there is some sort of thickness to this instead of it being just a flat plane that gets created. Okay, it'll actually feel a little bit more three-dimensional on that projection. Okay, so if you wanted to go with this route, you definitely could do something like that. From here, it's the same process. I go to MoGraph, I go to Effector, I go to Random. There it is. If it doesn't attach itself to the cloner, it's because I didn't have the cloner selected when I created the random. Okay, so right now it's random, but nothing is moving. If I go to the cloner, I go to Effectors, you'll see there's nothing listed. So I click the little arrow, I click on Random, and boom, now they're all random. Okay, so then I can click on the random and then control what each one is going to do. So I'll move these up like that, move them around, perfect. I'll go to rotation, give them some random rotations, good. Okay, and just like before, we're starting off with what color? Black, and then we're going to white. Okay, same thing. Okay, so right now I have all these cubes. That's going to be white. I need to clear them off the board. So I will use a couple different things. One of them is the random, just to give it some random motion. The other one, what was the other effector that we used? Plane. So we'll use plane also. Okay, the same exact ones, right? Plane and random. That's what we used. I use those guys like all the time because they're just so universal. They do exactly what I need them to do. I'm going to go to plane, and I'm going to set this to linear. That's what we set the other one to. I'm going to go to random. I'm going to set this one to linear. That's what we did. And I'm also going to go to plane and set the parameters here. Let's say 500 in the Y. Oh, maybe more. Depending on your scale, you may have to go like higher. So 2400, that looks good. And then my scale, again, I'll set this to uniform, absolute, -1. Okay? Those settings are exactly what we did on the title one, right? There's no difference in that. Exact same thing. Alt-G to group those together, and then I can animate these things coming in. Okay? I'm going to make it bigger though, because that's like crazy small, and it's just not being very drastic or very smooth. There we go.
It's like the Simpsons all running through the
Couch.
couch. That's what I mean with all this.
All right. So right now, if I were to render, completely black screen. So I need to get the white on there. So I'm going to go to my null. I'm going to go to my coordinates. I'm going to animate. You can start practicing on which direction things should be going in. So in this case, I'm only moving it in the Z direction. So I only need to set the Z keyframe. Okay, and I did it after 60 frames. That's 2 seconds. That's a nice time for that transition to happen. If yours is more intricate, you may want to go a little bit more. Oops. Yep, I think I want to go more, so I can just drag this to 90. There we go. Cool. Okay. Now, just like we did before, I could also go into that null, and I can grab the plane or the random or whatever, and just kind of offset one of them. So what I get now is that kind of movement, where it doesn't feel like they're all kind of coming together and wrapping up at the end. I think the plane could also use a little bit of random rotation on here too. There's no numbers. Don't try to copy my numbers. It's just random. So just let it go. There we go. Sweet. Okay. Now I'll make my material. I'll drop it on there. All right. If you were have good memory or were taking notes, what are the things I'm changing for my material? What was that? Luminance. Yep. So we're going to turn luminance on. What are we turning off?
Color. Everything else?
Yep, everything else. So it's just luminance. So in Austin's case, he said he wanted colors. So what he would do is under his luminance channel, he would just pump in that color right there. Okay? Now here's where, again, this is taking this simple assignment and just making it more advanced the more you want to kind of push your skills. If you're not certain, start off with a small one and see where it goes. Okay? If you get time, maybe you try this too. If not, no big deal. Okay? So I'm going to leave it at white for now just so we can see it, but then we'll get into other stuff. All right. So I'm going to set up my camera. So I'm going to go to my output, 400 by 440. Lock my ratio. I remember this was 1200, so I set that to 1200. Cool. I need to create a new camera. I need to do my split view. So I go to 2 views side by side. And the only reason I do that is so I can see the camera here, so I can be in it. And then over on this view, I need to go to my perspective view so I can actually move it around. Okay, so I'm going to click on the camera itself there. Zero all my stuff out. And then just literally move it and rotate it. Okay, and if you see my lines that are there, that's what I'm trying to line this up to. Oops, make sure my whole thing is there so I can see it. There we go. Okay. All right, so now if I render this out again, we started off with black, we're going to white, that's it. Now you'll see here, we actually get some sort of shape in them. Before we had planes, so we didn't really feel like it was 3D on there, okay? Now it's going to feel more like it's 3D. Now to give it more of a 3D look, what I'm going to do is a couple things. One, because I have this cube and I never hit C on it, I can go there and still modify what that original cube looks like. So if I go to the object, I can put a fillet on it, and you'll see the fillet gives it just a little nice border around there, which is like super duper awesome, right? Let's go lower here. Holy cow. If I hold shift and I use the arrows, it lets me like move up and down. It's crazy. Oh, okay. Yep, that makes sense then. Never mind. That was just regular arrows let me do it, and then shift just goes by 10. I didn't think that would work there. Okay. So we don't really see a huge change here, right? It looks exactly the same. If we were to zoom in, we might see a little bit of roundness maybe in there, but not much. What I need to do is I need to add something on top of it that will really help me accentuate some of these lines, okay? So under my render settings, I'm going to go to Effect, and I'm going to add what's called Ambient Occlusion. So we kind of talked about this when we went through the definitions. What it should do is wherever we have a crease, so wherever we have two objects that are close together, or we have like an inside part or an outside part, we should be able to see a dark area, all right? So that's what I'm going to add to this. I don't have a second screen, so I don't know what I'm doing there. So now when I add this on here, look at what we're going to get. Now it's actually going to feel like it's like filling it up, right? And so what's neat about this kind of effect is that as it fills up our screen with our image, it's going to feel like those blocks are still there, like they're kind of like pixely, right? So that's what's neat about having this kind of thing. Let's close that. We can accentuate some of these effects by changing the maximum ray length. Okay, so this is basically how far from the object it's going to be reading that ambient occlusion. So if I went up to, like, let's say 5,000, you'll see how I'm getting a lot more of that in here than I did before. I'll wait till it's done. I'll go to the previous one. There it is before. Here it is after. Okay, so what this does is we have two objects, this object here and this object here. When they're right next to each other, they're not very far away, so that 100 value worked perfectly. When they're close, it measures this area and gives us that dark spot. As they get further away, it's not picking up that they're close to each other anymore, and it doesn't give us any darkness. Okay, so by making that value bigger, it's saying, okay, this object is here, this object is there. I'm going to put a little bit of darkness on each one of these areas to help kind of pull those out a little bit more, right? So that's that one. That's pretty cool that we can add to that. Now let's go to, I'll just turn that off. Now let's go under our color here. Oops, not color, sorry. Not color. Under our luminance, maybe we can give that a little bit of color. And now we're going to get this kind of look to it. Again, this is something we could also do in After Effects. We can change our color inside of After Effects. We don't need to do it here, but we definitely can do it here. Okay? What else could we do? We could possibly add a slight glow to this. Let's just see what that looks like. Glows are typically after, so after everything's rendered, you'll see probably a glow pop on. It might be like too glowy because the entire thing is luminance, but we'll see. Boom. Yep, way too much glow. So let's knock the glow down to, like, what? 10% and 35%. 60%. Let's go there. Okay. Let's try that again. All right, now you'll notice too, when I hit the render key, it's taking longer, right, than it did a minute ago. It's going to take longer because what do I have? Ambient occlusions on here. I have cubes instead of a plane. And I have, you know, this glowy effect. So now with the glow on here, well, let's delete the bad glow one so we can see the before and after. Remove image. Duh. There we go. Okay. So here's no glow, here's glow. So you can see it adds a little bit more kind of funness to that, I guess you can call it. Funness. That works. Okay. Again, you could add that inside of After Effects too. You don't need to do it just inside here. Okay. So then what I would do is I would render this out. I would just take this and I would just do like we did before, set up my render settings, output it, drop it into After Effects, make a movie of it. Okay. Now it's not going from black to white. It's going from black to that color, but that's fine too. We can have just a color on there. Okay. Now even if you had a color in here, like this one here, if you had an image like this, do you think you could bring that into Photoshop and just make it a black and white image?
Yeah.
Right. So don't worry about necessarily that there's a color. As long as the color has enough value away from black that we could make it white if we wanted to, it's cool. Okay. So that's it. Ambient occlusion is something that reads the geometry's distance. After Effects, just like Photoshop, is just looking at pixels. It's just looking at this color and this color and this color. That's all it's doing. Okay? So that's something we would have to do inside here. Now the other area that, again, there's like this much stuff that we could do. We're doing like, you can't even see it because my hands can't get that close. Okay? That much stuff. We are doing an effect ambient occlusion which drops it on top of our end rendering. We can do a multi-pass ambient occlusion which renders it out separately, which then we could alter after the fact. Okay? So that would be something where it actually renders out our flat image where it doesn't look like it has ambient occlusion, and then a separate image that is ambient occlusion, and then we can put those together inside of After Effects. Okay? So for this, do not use the multi-pass one, because I haven't gone over that. Use the effect one. That's the one you'll want to do. Okay. There's other things too. Like, let me just. You can use this entire effect to affect pieces of geometry. Like all of these trees and buildings in here, I could make one scene that is entirely flat plane and have all these things kind of like populate onto the ground, right? I'm sure you've seen those videos before where it looks like stuff is just growing into place, right? Or just kind of popping into place. That's what these kinds of things are great for. This too, like these trees can just pop into where they're at. This one here too, okay? Anything that's not necessarily trees, it's anything really. You could have these effects affect entire pieces of geometry, so you can actually like make it look like something's coming together. If you had a Lego block set and you put all these Legos up that you built, you could have this same effect put the Legos back together, okay? So there's a lot that can be done with just using this plane and random one. There's also a whole bunch inside here too that you could also, you know, attempt to play with if you wanted to. Keep it simple if you're not sure, okay? If you don't have the time to go out there and start looking up videos of what each one does and all that, don't do it. Just keep it simple. Just do the plane. If you want to go a little bit further, you can do this. You could even take your radius on here and pull it up. There we go. If I make that radius bigger, it's going to give you more of a gap, more ambient occlusion, more dark spots, so it'll look cool. And then I think too, I shouldn't even try shader. No. Cloner, make sure that effector went on there. No. Shader. Oops. Alright, so it's still the same color. I may have to click something else. I played with this once before, but what this shader one does is kind of cool because it allows you to, again, control the drop off of stuff and the color of stuff. So as my object is up here, I could have it be like white, but then once it lands, I could have it be green or blue or whatever. Some of these allow you to even randomize the colors so that they are a random assortment of colors that move around instead of just being in one spot. I'm probably not going to remember how to do it exactly on, yes. Oh, that's why. Let me just drop this on here. Boom. And then go to reflectance is off, color. Should make that red for now. Shader, fall off, infinite. Nope, I forgot how to do it. I'd have to look it up. There's some sort of thing I'm supposed to click that makes it work, and I can't think of that specific one that I'm supposed to click. All right, but that's what it can do. Okay, that's what the shader button can do, right? I don't need to save that. Okay, so like I said, keep it simple. Start off with the plane if you need to. If you want to try the cube, do the cube. If you want to try something more advanced, do something more advanced. The whole idea is we're starting off with black and we're going to white. That's the whole idea. We're using some sort of geometry, obviously, to do that. Cubes work great because they're cubes. You could create custom shapes too. Let me go to a new scene just so I can get a fresh start of that. So if you did like this kind of shape here, and then you did a extrude, drop this under here. Oops, other way. There it is. Right? So I've created that shape, and then I can create a grid of those shapes and have those break apart, and then have those come back together. Your question? No. Same thing. So MoGraph, cloner. Make sure it's in the cloner. Make sure this is set to grid. In this case, I'm going to have 0 in the Z, or 1 in the Z, and then just keep moving that. And I'm moving this. And actually, I'm going to go... This one's a little bit different because of how it is. So I'm going to add one cloner here. Like I said, you can put a cloner inside of a cloner, right? There we go. So I'm going to line this up like this. And then I'm going to put this cloner inside of another cloner. And then that second cloner, I'm going to set it back to linear. Go in the X direction over, but then also go in the Y direction up. And you'll see how I can get those pieces to basically like lock in together. And if I go back to my first cloner, I make more copies. I go back to my second cloner, make more copies, right? Okay, now with this one, obviously it's not going to fit perfectly in that shape, so no big deal. I just make it big enough to kind of cover that entire shape, and then I just use that, right? I can just zoom in on a certain section that I want to see. And again, it creates something different than just the squares. But just keep, whatever it is you want to try something. Go to black, go to white, done. Render it out. Cool. Any other questions? Okay.